Turn on the tap in an American home, and the water itself averages about 3/4 of a cent per gallon, an estimate that includes fixed charges, not the marginal price of another gallon. Now pick up bottled water, combine every major format into one national category, and that category sold for about $3.08 per gallon at retail. Those are not prices for identical water. One is a national residential estimate from the EPA. The other blends cold singles, multi-packs, large containers, delivery, vending, sparkling water, and imports. Local rates and individual bottle prices vary. But the distance between those figures gives us a useful question. What are you buying when water moves from a pipe into a portable, sealed product that can be stocked, shipped, chilled, and handed to you almost anywhere? There is no public ledger that breaks a typical bottle into exact shares for water, plastic, freight, labor, and profit. So we will follow the money as far as the numbers allow, through the bottle and the bottler to the place where you reach for it. That journey explains how an inexpensive input becomes a large business, and why paying for it can make perfect sense. Start with the sheer scale. Americans consumed 47.3 gallons of bottled water per person in 2024. Across the country, that came to about 16.4 billion gallons. In the categories tracked by Beverage Marketing Corporation, bottled water is the largest packaged beverage category by volume, more than 13 gallons per person ahead of the second largest. This is not a small luxury niche. It is a routine grocery item, a checkout purchase, an office supply, an emergency reserve, and a travel companion, all sitting inside the same enormous category. The long-term pattern is just as striking. Bottled water volume grew in every year from 1977 through 2024, except 2008 and 2009. Through changing packages and trends, demand kept expanding. That matters because a market this large cannot be explained by gullibility or advertising alone. People keep choosing the product because it solves ordinary problems extremely well. Before we take the price apart, we need to understand those problems. Buying bottled water is often completely rational. You may be walking through a station with no clean cup and no convenient fountain. You may be driving, working outside, or packing a lunch. You may want something cold right now, in a container that closes, fits in a bag, and tastes familiar wherever you bought it. At home, a power cut or storm can interrupt service. A boil water notice can make a sealed supply genuinely useful. Even without an emergency, tap water can taste different because of minerals, treatment, or plumbing. Consistency has value when you travel or dislike your local taste. That does not make bottled water always the best choice. With safe tap water and time to chill it, the tap is dramatically cheaper. A reusable bottle can carry that advantage with you. But purchases happen in situations, not spreadsheets. The person buying a cold bottle on a hot platform is not comparing two abstract gallons in a laboratory. That person is buying safe storage, portability, predictable taste, and immediate access. That is the key to the price. The product is not just the liquid, it is the liquid made usable in a particular place, at a particular moment. So begin with the water itself. Compared with the category's final retail revenue, the source water is generally inexpensive. But that does not tell us its exact share of the cost, and the public category data do not disclose that share. Purified water, spring water, and imported water also do not begin in the same place or follow the same route. A bottler using a public supply faces one set of treatment and operating costs. A spring water producer has to collect from a qualifying source and operate around that location. An imported product may travel a much longer distance before reaching its buyer. So, water is not one uniform input with one uniform cost. And inexpensive does not mean costless. The defensible point is narrower. The liquid alone cannot explain the final retail number. To understand the rest, look first at the object wrapped around it. A plastic water bottle begins as something that looks less like a bottle and more like a small, thick test tube. That piece is called a preform. The preform is made from PET resin, heated, placed into a mold, and expanded with air until it takes the familiar shape. Then the bottle must be filled, capped, labeled, inspected, grouped into cases, or wrapped into multipacks, stacked, and prepared to move. Each step needs material, machinery, energy, maintenance, and people. The cap, label, and outer wrap, tray, or case are manufactured too. The filling line has to run cleanly without turning a lightweight container into a leaking one. The available category data cannot rank the package against the water by cost. They do not separate resin, caps, labels, machinery, or source water into auditable shares. What we can say is that the package is not incidental. It is the physical product being designed, formed, sealed, moved, displayed, and eventually recycled or discarded. The bottle creates portability. It also creates a manufacturing job before any water reaches your hand. Now consider the word purified. It can sound like a clever label placed on ordinary water, especially when the original source is a public system. But the source is only the beginning of the process. Aquafina originates from public water sources. Most Dasani facilities use municipal water, although some use protected groundwater. The companies then purify the water. Depending on the facility and product, that can involve filtration, reverse osmosis, sanitation testing, and adding minerals to create a consistent taste. PepsiCo and Coca-Cola disclose those source facts themselves. They are not evidence that every bottled water brand uses municipal water, and they are not a gotcha. They show one economic model inside a much broader category. Start with water from an existing system, process it to a product specification, put it into a controlled package, and make the result taste consistent across a wide market. That work under federal bottling rules requires equipment, staff, quality control, cleaning, and records. Even with inexpensive incoming water, producing a repeatable, shelf-stable packaged drink is an industrial operation. Source and finished product are different things. Where water originated does not tell you the finished cost. Treatment is a real cost line inside the revenue bridge, even though the data do not reveal its exact size. Spring water follows a different logic. Spring is a defined FDA source designation, with requirements governing where the water originates and how it can be collected. It is not simply a decorative word that any bottler can place on any package. That source can shape the entire operation. The producer cannot move the spring beside the biggest city or the cheapest warehouse. Collection, testing, bottling, and transport have to work around the source and the rules that apply to it. But the designation answers a specific question. Where did this water come from? By itself, it does not establish that the water is purer or safer than properly treated water from another source. It also does not reveal the share of the retail price caused by collection or transport. Purified and spring water can therefore be meaningfully different products without turning either one into the hero or villain. One emphasizes a controlled treatment process. The other begins with a regulated kind of source. Both still need a package, quality control, storage, and a route to the customer. Then comes the stubborn physical problem. Water is heavy. That sounds obvious, but it controls much of the business. A truck carrying bottled water fills up with a product whose value per unit of weight is usually modest. The farther it travels, the more fuel, driver time, equipment time, and handling the route demands. Packages can be lightened, cases stacked efficiently, and routes tightened. But the liquid cannot be compressed for delivery, and expanded at the store. Every sale still requires moving the full weight. That helps explain why many bottling operations sit relatively close to their markets. Warehouses, store deliveries, vending routes, and home and office delivery add different handling steps. Notice what this does not tell us. It does not reveal freight's exact share of a gallon's price or rank it against packaging, processing, or anything else. Those component shares are not public in the category table. It tells us something simpler: location matters. Water may be inexpensive at its source, but putting heavy packages wherever customers expect to find them is a separate economic task. Now we reach the first major stop in the money. Across the whole bottled water category in 2024, producers took in roughly $1.72 per gallon. That is a volume-weighted average across very different products and channels. It is not the cost of a representative bottle, and it is not the path followed by one identical gallon. Still, the figure gives us a boundary. Packaging, processing, labor, logistics, marketing, overhead, and producer profit all have to fit inside roughly $1.72 a gallon. The data do not disclose how that amount splits. We cannot subtract the tap water rate from producer revenue and call the remainder packaging or profit. Producers handle different amounts of transport, while products use different sources, packages, and routes. An average shows the size of the pool without showing who receives each part. What it does show is that producers, in aggregate, took in substantially less than consumers ultimately spent at retail. That is one side of the revenue bridge. The retail total is the other. Because the data mix many products and channels, neither figure marks one identical gallon at a single physical checkpoint. At retail, the category sold for about $3.08 per gallon. Put that beside the roughly $1.72 producers took in, and the spread between those figures is about 44% of the retail total, about 44 cents of every retail dollar. That spread is not a measured margin or proven profit for any single group. It has to cover downstream distribution, transport, retail operations, chilling, and everyone's profit along that part of the journey. The category data do not tell us how those pieces divide. After a sealed case exists, it may move through a warehouse, ride on another truck, occupy cooler space, and wait under refrigeration. A vending machine must be stocked, powered, and serviced. Home delivery adds vehicles and scheduled stops. Those systems provide availability in different ways. An airport makes the location effect unusually visible. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey benchmarks airport concessions against local street prices and requires one bottled water option of 16 to 20 ounces at $2 or less. That is one required affordable option, not a cap on every bottle in the terminal. Airport concessionaires also commonly operate under agreements involving base rent or a percentage of gross sales, whichever is higher. But that general structure does not explain the price of any specific bottle. Airport prices are shaped by concession rules and location, as well as by the packaged product. The policy does not tell us a concessionaire's margin, and it does not establish that any premium is rent. The revenue bridge stops at the spread. It shows how much space exists between producer revenue and retail sales. It does not give us permission to invent what happened inside. This is also why a bottle of water is not one economic product. A grocery multipack is a planned purchase. It moves in bulk, sits in a cart, travels home with the customer, and may wait for days before anyone opens it. Price matters because the buyer can compare packages, brands, and alternatives in advance. A cold single is a different proposition. It may be waiting beside a checkout, inside a vending machine, or in the only open shop near a platform. The buyer is often thirsty now. The bottle is already cold, easy to carry, and available without planning. The liquid can be similar while the service around it is different. Refrigeration, placement, restocking, and immediate convenience change what is being offered. That does not let us calculate a universal convenience premium because stores and channels vary and the category average mixes them together. It does explain why comparing the cheapest multi-pack gallon with a cold single can mislead. They solve different versions of the same problem. One is a heavy household staple bought ahead of time. The other is cold now and already in your hand. At the premium end, the category stretches even further. Imports account for about 2% of bottled water gallons, but more than 12% of retail sales. That means imported water sold for at least about $17 per gallon, or at least roughly 5.6 times the $3.08 category average. At least is essential here. The retail share is reported as more than 12%, so the calculation gives us a floor, not a precise average price. The contrast tells us a premium exists, not what creates each piece. Transport, packaging, positioning, product type, and sales channel may all matter. The category numbers do not divide the result among them. What they reveal is how far bottled water has moved beyond a single commodity. At one end, it is a practical multi-pack loaded into a pantry. At another, it is a chilled convenience purchase. At the premium end, origin and presentation can become part of the product itself. All of those gallons sit in the same broad retail total. That is why the $3.08 average is useful for seeing the market and dangerous when treated as the price of a typical bottle. The average is a map of the category, not a receipt from one purchase. Now walk the numbers back down. The bottled water category sold for about $3.08 per gallon at retail. Producers took in roughly $1.72 per gallon. Residential tap water averaged about 3/4 of a cent per gallon. On that broad comparison, the retail category average is roughly 400 times the water-only tap rate. And even when water and wastewater charges are counted together, it is still roughly 180 times the combined rate. That is an order of magnitude comparison, not a claim that every household or every bottle faces the same price. And it is not a component cost breakdown. It cannot rank those component costs or assign the spread to one company. What it can show is the transformation. An inexpensive local utility service becomes a manufactured package. The package passes through treatment, testing, filling, warehousing, heavy transport, store operations, and sometimes refrigeration. The final offer changes again depending on whether it is a pantry multi-pack, an emergency supply, a vending machine purchase, a cold single, or an imported premium product. Sometimes the tap is the obvious answer. Sometimes what matters is that the water is sealed, portable, familiar, cold, and already waiting where you need it. The price reflects the physical journey and the situation of the sale. So the next time you see a bottle beside a faucet, the right question is not simply, why pay for water? It is, what had to happen to make this water available here, like this, right now? The water is only one part of what you're buying. The rest is packaging, processing, getting it to you, keeping it cold, and having it there the moment you want it.